Hello, I'm Jeff Paur, senior writer with RealTime Fantasy Sports, and welcome to another edition of the RealTime Fantasy Sports Show. I'm very excited today to be joined by Mike Barner, who is a contributing writer here at RealTime Fantasy Sports, been doing it for the last several years. He helps out with baseball and football as well. Mike, thanks so much for joining me on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Jeff. Looking forward to talking some fantasy football. Let's go.
Yeah, definitely. So last week on the show, Mike, we had on Stephen Hawley, who was a past fantasy championship winner. That's our big contest. We give away $500,000 for our fantasy champion winner. You can go to rtsports.com, click on the Money League link. You can see all our different games on there. But Stephen Hawley said, I asked him straight out, I said, what do you think is the make or break rounds? He said the mid round picks. So I'm going to tie it into last week and let's hit mid round targets. Let's talk about guys that we like in the mid rounds of drafts last year. What do you good with doing that, Mike?
Yeah, I've got some queued up here. Let's do it.
Yeah, definitely. And also, don't hesitate at all if you're out there watching here this live. Put a message there if you have a question, comment, anything at all you want to ask Mike or I. Don't hesitate to do that. We're happy to answer any questions, definitely. So if you want to hit us up here on the comments section, don't hesitate to do that at all. Mike and I will be happy to answer any questions you might have. So we're going to talk about mid round targets now. Before we get into that, Mike, what's your strategy when it comes to mid round targets? Do you make a list ahead of time? How do you handle it before a draft?
Yeah, I generally have some guys that I'm looking to target in the middle rounds. I'm not necessarily one that will play the ADP game of, well, this is a guy that I wasn't originally interested in, but he's falling. So maybe he's fallen so far that I need to take him. If I don't like a player, I'm not going to take him just because maybe he's fallen one round or 10 spots more than I thought he was going to. There's players that I want to target. And those are the guys that I'll try to work off of in the list in the middle rounds.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I do the same strategy. I kind of have a couple guys in mind before a draft. I've done a lot so far, so I got to have a pretty good idea where people fall. But for the most part, there's a group of guys that I like to target every draft so far this year, and hopefully I get them. And you're going to hear a lot about them here in the next couple minutes because I'm going to give you all my mid round targets here coming up. Mike and I each have five. So Mike, I'm going to go ahead and let you go first. So go ahead and give me your first mid round target.
All right, so I'm going to go. My first one's Darren Waller, tight end for the Giants. His ADP is 66. This is in PPR scoring on Real Time Fantasy Sports. Now, he showed his upside 2019, 2020, at least 90 receptions and 1,145 yards in both seasons. He had that big 2020 campaign where he had 9 touchdowns. He was targeted at least 117 times in both those seasons. So he was obviously one of the centerpieces of the Raiders offense. He's going to be one of the centerpieces of the Giants offense. There's been a lot of news out of training camp. Daniel Jones is throwing him early and often. There was using that one day where they took him out of practice for a while and they said it was basically to force Daniel Jones to throw to somebody else. Those are very encouraging signs that you want to see. Giants have a lot of smaller slot type receivers, so I think they're going to go to Waller a lot inside the red zone. Now, the concern with Waller obviously is injuries. He's played 20 total games the last 2 seasons. However, I just can't pass on his upside. I've taken him in a couple of drafts so far. I got him in the 5th round with the 53rd pick of the Scott Fish Bowl. Obviously, there's a little bit of a tight end premium there, so you got to grab him a little early. In the Raz Bowl, I grabbed him in the 6th round. So he's definitely someone that I'm targeting this season, and I think he's going to have a real big year.
Yeah, you can get him after the top tight ends are off the board. Definitely, he goes a little after that. And like you said, the big issue with Waller is always the injury, but his ceiling is super high. And are you a Giant fan? You're a New York guy, correct, Mike?
I am, but that has no bearing on me liking Darren Waller. I'll just get that out there right now. That has no bearing on it.
Okay, I'm good with that. I am worried about the receivers, though. I mean, they seem like so many similar options, in my opinion. Hyatt's the one guy that stands out, more of a big time speed guy, but the rest of them seem like they're all kind of similar options, and I think that could actually be a positive for Waller, in my opinion. I don't know if you
Yeah, I
you have
completely
more
agree. I
insight.
mean, eventually, it doesn't seem like all these guys are going to make the team between Paris Campbell, Sterling Shepard, Wendell Robinson, Cole Beasley, Jamison Crowder. They just have so many of these slot type guys, and a lot of them don't contribute on special teams too, which is going to be an issue. But I think they've been doing a lot of two tight end sets in training camp with Waller and Bellinger, so I think Waller's going to be relied upon heavily.
Okay, I'm going to give you my first mid-round target, and that's Michael Pittman, the receiver with the Indianapolis Colts. So I actually tweeted about this last week. I think he's going too low in drafts, Is his quarterback situation really worse than last year and that offense worse than last year? I know Jonathan Taylor's holding out right now, and that's a concern, but I think Anthony Richardson's a big upgrade. I know he has some issues throwing the ball, accuracy issues, and he might have a couple stumbling games along the way his rookie season. But overall, I think it's a better situation for Pittman. Last year, he was wide receiver 20 and he scored just 4 touchdowns. Pittman currently his ADP on our site is 75 and he's wide receiver 30. So he's going 10 after what his ranking was last year when he scored just 4 touchdowns, had a terrible quarterback situation. The offense was a mess as well. He has at least 129 targets 2 straight seasons also, and he was just a catch shy of 100 last year. I think Pittman's a great mid-round candidate. You can get him after a lot of the elite receivers are gone, and that's another reason a lot of times, especially if I'm in a best ball format, I'm going to wait on a receiver because I can get someone like Pittman and other guys we're going to talk about later in the draft. So I'm all in at Pittman this year for his price at ADP of 75 right now. It's a guy I've been getting a lot of my early drafts. Any thoughts on Pittman at all, Mike?
Yeah, I agree. Like you said, they had terrible quarterback play last year, and he had 99 catches for 925 yards, and he's the undisputed top option on that team. Gardner Minshew, Anthony Richardson, probably more Richardson than Minshew this season. I think he's the number one wide receiver on a team that's going to have to throw a lot because they're probably going to be down in games. So I definitely think 100 catches for 1,000 yards is in the cards for him.
All right, we have a question on our comments section, and I apologize if I mispronounced the name, but I believe it's Caden. He has a fourth pick in the draft. How should they go about it? Any thoughts on the fourth pick? Kind of a tough spot. You know, after those first three, it's usually Chase, Jefferson, and McCaffrey, and then the fourth pick, it can go several different ways. You have any thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the scoring, probably Eckler is one that kind of stands out. Eckler or Cooper Cup are probably the two that I'd be considering at that point based on your scoring format.
Yeah, I think Eckler's a safe play personally because he's going to get a lot of catches and he's the undisputed starter in that offense and he's going to get a lot of touches as well. So I'd probably lean Eckler personally. Cup has serious upside, but I just worry about his injury situation. So a couple other people putting some people on the list that they're targeting that are similar to what I'm going to talk about a little later. So we'll get to those comments a little later. Give me your next mid round target, Mike.
All right, we're going to do Deontay Johnson of the Steelers at ADP 82. Talk about targets. He's had at least 144 targets in each of the last 3 seasons. Now, his touchdown numbers are odd. He had 7 in 2020. That's good. 8 in 2021. Also good. Last year, 0. Goose egg. That's not going to happen again. What I like about last year, despite the no touchdown receptions, he had 18 red zone targets. That was tied for the 18th most in the NFL. I think Kenny Pickett's going to be better this season, his first full season as a starter. So that should help with the touchdowns. I think we're looking at least 125, 130 targets, maybe 90 or 100 catches, 1,000 yards, 5 to 7 touchdowns. He's going late in the 6th round. I think he's a really solid wide receiver too.
I totally agree, Mike. That's definitely a guy I'm targeting in drafts. I think his ceiling is just super high in that offense. And like you said, he had 18 red zone targets last year. That's just a complete uh, blip on the radar, him getting 0 touchdowns, in my opinion. I think he's going to improve on that. I like Pickett to improve this year as well. So I'm all in on Deontay Johnson. I think that's a great call on that. My next target is Geno Smith. His ADP is 125. If you can believe this, I don't know if many people realize this. He was fifth overall in fantasy quarterback scoring last year. And the big thing with him was his accuracy. He was the most accurate thrower in the NFL. He completed 69.8% of his passes. He was fourth overall in on target percentage at 78.8%. He also was the best in all of football when it comes to bad throw percentage. So his targets were on throw. He didn't make bad throws. And he plays in a great offense with a lot of top playmakers in DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. And now they added Jackson Smith and the Jigba, which could end up being the best receiver of the lot. And those are 3 really good receivers. And then the other thing is their running game is hurting right now. Both Kenneth Walker, Charbonnet, the rookie, are banged up. So they could be slowed a little bit early in the season. And Smith is dirt cheap. His ADP is 125. You can get him as the 15th, 16th quarterback off the board. And this is a guy, in my opinion, I think he could be a top 10 fantasy quarterback once again. So if you're going to wait on the position and want to platoon a couple guys, I think going Smith and getting someone like Jared Goff or even Daniel Jones from your Giants there, Mike, I think it's a good way to go personally. And I'm all in at Smith at that price tag. I think he's going to have a big year. All right, Mike, give
Yeah,
me. Yeah, go ahead.
I can't argue with you there on Smith. You mentioned the 3 wide receivers he's got. He's also got a couple of good tight ends too, and Noah Fant and Will Disley. So he's got plenty of options to be successful again.
Yeah, definitely. Give me another one of your mid-round targets there, Mike.
Yeah, I'm going to go Gabe Davis of the Bills. He was the breakout darling last year. His ADP this year has fallen to 109 because he did not perform well last season, especially in PPR formats. He had just 48 receptions. However, what I like, he had 93 targets despite catching just 48 passes. He had 836 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns. He dealt with an ankle injury for much of last season. That limited both him physically, and he even talked about how he was mentally battling through that ankle injury, even when he was playing through it. I think people who are disappointed by him last season might be passing on him this year, which is why his ADP has fallen. Worst case scenario, you're looking at a guy who's the number 2 wide receiver on one of the best offenses in football. If anything happens to Stephon Diggs, he becomes having crazy high upside. I think even if Diggs is healthy, I wouldn't be surprised if Davis finished somewhere around 900 to 1,000 receiving yards and 8 to 10 touchdowns. He's basically going in the 9th round, someone's wide receiver 3, well worth the risk for me.
Yeah, I agree. And I was just trying to open up our ADP from last year because I want to see where Davis was going, but it was a lot higher than 109. And I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
like you said, he was the darling of everybody's wide receiver core last year. Everybody wanted Gabe Davis on their team. Uh, Unfortunately, I can't find it right now, but regardless, he was going. Oh, there it is, 45. So his ADP was 45 last year. This year it's 109. Quite the difference.
Crazy difference.
Yeah, and I absolutely love him in a best ball format, especially because he's going to go off some weeks. He may disappoint you a little bit in season long if he's a little bit up and down, but in a best ball, I think he's great value, especially at 109. I think Gabe Davis could definitely outperform that. All right, I'm going to give you another mid one of my mid round targets. That's tight end Chig Okonkwo. So I was higher on him before Hopkins was there, but I'm still not too worried about Hopkins taking away a lot of targets from him. The Titans love to throw to the tight end. I still think Okonkwo is going to have a breakout season. He had double-digit fantasy points 4 of his last 6 games. He was the big play threat for the Titans in their passing game. He averaged 14.1 yards per reception, and he was a rookie tight end. Everyone says rookie tight ends can't produce in the NFL, but Okonkwo did that last year. He proved everybody wrong, and he was not even that highly regarded compared to some of the other ones out there. And Okonkwo was the best rookie tight end, in my opinion, all of last season. So I still think the Titans are going to throw to him a lot. Ryan Tannehill, still the QB, which I think is a positive for that passing game. Hopkins could actually open up things for him in the middle a little bit. So I still think Okonkwo, just great values. ADP's 141. I consider him a low end number 1 tight end, and you can draft him as a backup at this point with that ADP where it is. So again, it's kind of like the QB situation. If you want to wait on tight end and pair a Okonkwo with another guy, who goes in the similar range and find the right matchups, I think it could work out well if you don't want to spend high draft capital on a tight end. I think Okonkwo is going to do well. You still high on Okonkwo at all, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, where he's going, ADP 141, I think he's well worth the risk there. If you decide that you're passing on tight end early in your draft, even you're passing on the second tier of tight ends, taking a flyer on him that late, it's not going to kill you even if he flops, but he does have the upside. They don't exactly have a ton of great receiving options, and usually tight ends are better in their second season. So, yeah, I definitely like him at that price for sure.
Definitely. I actually thought about putting Dalton Kincaid on this list. I didn't do it. He's a rookie tight end, but going back to your Bills, Gabe Davis play, I think Kincaid could have some big games too, and I'm not too worried about him being a rookie. He just looks the part, and you hear those comparisons to Travis Kelsey, and it gets you excited. You have any thoughts on Kincaid at all? Not that.
Yeah, like you said, he's certainly got a lot of rave reviews in training camp. I think having Knox there does hurt him a little bit. They don't exactly have to rush him into a prominent role, but
Mhm.
again, when you're going with dart throws at tight ends late in drafts, he's someone that should certainly be considered.
All right, Mike, give me another one of your mid-round targets here. We're rolling along here.
Not everybody loves him in real life, but in fantasy, we all have to like Kirk Cousins. Vikings ADP of 117. He is currently the 13th QB going off the board based on ADP, so he's not even going as a starter in 12-team formats. What I like to do is compare him to Dak Prescott. Prescott has an ADP of 92. Now, in Prescott's range, players going or including Rashad Penny and Jordan Addison, I'd much rather take them. Prescott's best season was in 2021. He had just over 4,400 passing yards, 37 touchdowns, and 10 picks. Now, last season, Cousins had over 4,500 passing yards, 29 touchdowns, and 14 picks. So, pretty similar numbers. What you like about Cousins, consistency. 4 of the last 5 seasons, he's thrown for at least 4,220 yards and 29 touchdowns. I would much rather take Cousins 2 rounds later and get someone like Penny and Addison in the same range that Prescott's going.
Yeah, I agree. I like Cousins a lot. I think he was sixth overall in fantasy quarterback scoring last year, if I'm not mistaken. So again, he was a top 10 option. You can get him really late. Great receivers to work with. If you want to wait on a QB, I think it's the way to go. Thinking about taking guys like Cousins and Geno Smith. So I like that call. It's definitely Mike. Let's see. Question in the chat. Someone put, where would you take Jacobs and Taylor? I see them falling to late third or late third, late fourth round. I think Jacobs plays, but I'm skeptical about Taylor. What do you think of these two? What I have thoughts on them. What are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, I agree. I feel better about Jacobs than I do Taylor, simply because Taylor's coming off the injury issue too, and that seems like it's a much more contentious situation with the Colts than Jacobs is dealing with the Raiders. So if I had to pick between the two, Taylor, we've seen his crazy high upside, but I would feel better taking a chance on Jacobs than I would Taylor.
I'm the same way. I just took Jacobs in a draft. I took him in the third round, and I can't pass up that value. I mean, he was top 5 in fantasy running back scoring last year, and I still don't think he has a ton of leverage. I think he's going to come back sooner than later. Maybe he misses a game or two, but I still don't. I don't think that's going to happen with Jacobs. Like you said, I think Taylor's a bigger wild card. I think he's kind of dug in his heels a little bit, and he worries me a little more. And again, I think if you want to take a chance, like if you're in a big game contest and they're falling, and those guys end up playing, like if you're in a fantasy championship and they're falling and they might play, I might have to take a chance on them though, just because the ceiling is just huge. So it's tough for me to let him fall too far, especially Jacobs. I still think he's going to be a good fantasy play this year. But that's a great question. All right, I'll give you another one of my mid-round targets, and that's someone put him in the chat, and I'm going to say it now. It's Jahan Dotson. So I really like him a lot this year. He had a hamstring injury last year that really slowed his rookie season. He looked good when he was on the field, though. He had 35 catches for 523 yards and 7 touchdowns in 12 games. So he was a really top red zone target, 7 scores in just 12 games. He had double-digit fantasy points 4 of his last 5 games. He's an explosive player in the passing game. He can do well at all 3 levels, turn a short play into a big pass. He can catch the deep ball as well, do well in the intermediate routes. He's a good route runner. I think he's going to have a 1,000-yard season as long as he can stay healthy. And the addition of Eric Bieniemy, regardless of if he's being too hard on the players or whatever's going on up there, I think it's a huge plus for the offense and Dotson. Also, the QB situation should be better as well for Dotson. So his ADP right now is 98. I like Terry McLaurin too, but Dotson, I think I like his value a little better at this point because I think he can produce really good numbers this year and he's going to have a breakout season. You have any thoughts on Dotson at all, Mike?
I mean, he's pretty much the undisputed number 2 wide receiver there. And the good thing about that role is with McLaurin being so dominant as a number 1, defenses are obviously going to be focusing their attention on stopping him. And that could lead to some open opportunities for Dotson. The tight end situation is not great. Logan Thomas is always hurt. So it's not like they have a great tight end there either. So they don't have a lot of passing options for an offense that might struggle. So they might need to throw some more to try and get some balls moving here. I have no problem with him that late in drafts for sure.
All right, Mike, one more mid-round target, your last one. Who do you got?
All right, Tank Bigsby, running back for the Jaguars, ADP 123. He was the 88th overall pick in the draft in the 3rd round for the Jaguars. He had some touchdown. He was great there in Auburn. He had 20 touchdowns in the last 2 seasons. He's the number 2 running back behind Travis Etienne, so that puts him in a good spot. He's got a lot of rave reviews out of training camp. You got to kind of take those with a grain of salt because there's a lot of rave reviews coming out of training camp. But the thing with Etienne is he only had 5 rushing touchdowns last season. He had 43 carries inside the red zone. So he wasn't exactly great at finding his way into the end zone. Now, part of the reason that the Jaguar running backs have a depleted upside when it comes to rushing touchdowns is Trevor Lawrence. He had 5 rushing touchdowns last season. That's going to be something that's going to be a threat for him throughout his career as a quarterback because he's very good with his legs. However, I do think he could get some added Bigsby could get some added scoring opportunities if ETN struggles again inside the red zone. What I like here is this is going to be a dynamic offense. They've got Calvin Ridley. All the reports from him have been positive out of camp. So they should be a more prolific offense, which leads to a lot of scoring opportunities. And some running backs going around the same time as Bigsby. Samaje Perine, 102. Damian Harris, 109. And Deontay Foreman, 112. So they're all going a round or two ahead of Bigsby. And I don't think any of those three have the same upside that he does, especially Perine with everything looking pretty good for Javonte Williams here. I would take Bigsby over all of them. So I think he's well worth the risk at his ADP of 123.
Yeah, I like Bigsby. He's the guy who scored double-digit touchdowns this season. Like you said, explosive offense, and I think, especially when you're looking at mid-round picks, it makes sense to me to target guys who are in good offenses. So, a lot of times, guys that are on poor teams are gonna, obviously have some struggles offensively, and that's why they fall in drafts. That's why they're moving down towards these middle to later rounds. So, I think getting guys with an explosive offenses is definitely a smart move in the mid rounds, and you're going to see that with my next pick here, and that's Rashad Penny. So neither Eagles back, DeAndre Swift, Rashad Penny, have the ability to stay healthy very well. So that's a concern. But I actually think Penny might be more talented of the two backs, and he's getting overlooked. You can get him 40 picks later than DeAndre Swift. Penny's ADP is 92, and the Eagles, they love to rotate their backs, and they're going to go with a hot hand. And they have three backs. Kenneth Gainwell, too. Don't forget about him. He's another guy that I think is not a bad play late in drafts. That's more of a late round pick than a mid round pick, but they're all going to get work. The Eagles have a great offense. I would not be surprised if Penny emerges as a starter at some point. So before he broke his leg last year, he was averaging 6.1 yards per carry, and he's done that 2 straight years. He's averaged more than 6 yards per carry 2 straight seasons. So at his price tag of a 92 ADP, I think Penny's definitely worth the risk in one of the best offenses in football. I think it's going to be the best offense in the NFC personally. And I just think he's a great risk to take at that point in the draft. If you want to take some chances on some guys that can emerge and really outperform the ADP, I think Penny's one of those guys. You have any thoughts on Penny at all?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Penny was a guy that I was thinking of putting on my list of players that I sent to you. The great thing about the Eagles is they have one of the best, if not the best, offensive lines in football. And you talk about how prolific their offense is. They were, crushing teams in the first halves of games last year. So they were putting up a lot of crazy passing numbers early in games, and then they were basically running out the clock in the second half. And if that situation unfolds a lot again this year, where they're blowing out teams early, they're not going to be going with DeAndre Swift to help milk the clock late in games.
It's true.
They're going to be going with a guy like Penny or even Gainwell, like you talked about. So Penny could be the guy they also look to when they get in close rushing attempts. There's the issue with the Hurts, how awesome he is rushing inside the red zone and that kind of push play that they like to do to push him forward. But I wouldn't be surprised if Penny finishes the season with somewhere around 10 touchdowns rushing, and to get that late in drafts. And you also mentioned the injury issues. Penny hasn't been a pillar of health. Swift hasn't been a pillar of health. If Swift goes down, and then Penny is going to have a huge role. So yeah, I definitely think at that point in drafts, he's someone that I'm targeting. If you're passing on the top tier running backs early, say you start off with a wide receiver or a couple wide receivers and a tight end, your first three picks, Penny is someone I would be targeting in the middle rounds to help shape up your roster.
It's weird. I've done drafts both ways this year where I've targeted receivers early and targeted running backs early. And I like the way they played out in both instances. I think you can make it work. So it's really kind of fascinating this year, in my opinion, because I think the receiver position has moved up. More people are taking receivers early, but I also think receivers super deep this year. And then running backs with people taking receivers early get pushed down a little bit. Is there a strategy you like to use that you've liked to use this year at least?
Yeah, I've deployed some different things. I usually don't take quarterbacks early, but I'll give you an example in my Raz Bowl, which is we talked about PPR best ball format. I started off with Jamar Chase and Chris Olave as my first two picks. I didn't really like how the running backs were shaping up once my pick came around in the third round, so I took Mahomes. And I said, I'll just wait on running backs and see how this plays out. I was very happy with it. I ended up getting both Penny and Bixby later on in the draft. and I was happy with how my running backs played out. So I don't have a problem. Generally in fantasy, we always say grab your running backs early, but
Mhm.
with the way that things have been shifting in recent seasons, we've seen how important those wide receivers are. So I don't have a problem waiting on running backs and taking them. I don't normally take quarterbacks early. If I do, it's got to be one of those top guys, Mahomes or Hurts or Josh Allen. It's got to be one of those three if I'm going to go early. So, but if you do, don't panic. There's some good running backs you can get in the mid rounds.
Yeah, definitely. I have always been a proponent of waiting on a QB, but kind of changing my thinking a little bit more this year with trying to get one of those elite guys early. I just think it really pays off, especially in non-best ball formats. Something I've never done in the past, but I'm coming around to it a little bit more. We got another question here, though, I want to get to before we get out of here, Mike. And it's a good one. Which rookie receiver do you think will provide the most value based on their ADP? It's a good question. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Addison is a guy we mentioned briefly. He's someone that I'd be targeting this year. As good as Justin Jefferson is, he can't catch all the passes.
Yeah.
I mean, they have Hawkins in there too, which is a big help, but they lost Adam Thielen. So I think with teams focusing so much on Jefferson, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for Addison. So he's been someone that I have gotten in a couple of drafts, and I'm high on this season. We saw how good Jefferson was right away when he stepped in as a rookie wide receiver. Addison has a great situation with Cousins as his quarterback. No Madison no Dalvin Cook this year. So the change over to Madison, we have to see how that goes. I think Addison will have plenty of opportunities for where he's going.
I'll give you two. The first one is Jackson Smith in the Jigba. I think you can get him in that second tier of receivers fairly late in the middle rounds. And I just love his potential. I think he's going to have a huge rookie season. Even with the two other good receivers on the roster, I still think Smith Najigba has a huge ceiling. He's just super talented. I would not be surprised if he emerges as the top target in that offense before the season's over with. So he's a guy like, and I'm going to talk about your giant there, Mike, and Jalen Hyatt. I feel like I've gotten him in a lot of drafts, and why not take a chance on him? So I just think you can get him late and he could emerge as the number one receiver in that offense. Why not do it? So Hyatt's another guy I like a lot in drafts, in my early drafts at least. You've been taking any Hyatt stock?
I haven't gotten him anywhere, but I'll tell you, he certainly sure has been getting a lot of positive notes, and they need deep threats, which is important for their offense. If they're going to be hitting Waller a lot in the middle of the field and all these slot guys, they're going to need someone that can go. And Daniel Jones, he hasn't been given a lot of opportunities to throw deep, but when he has, he's been good at it. They kind of went into that weird offensive system when Joe Judge was there, and I think that stunted him, especially with passing deep. And then with the new coaching staff last year, I think they were understandably very cautious with Jones, trying to see if he was going to pan out. And now that he has in his second season, I think you're going to see them take a lot more deep shots, and Hyatt would be one that would benefit from that strategy.
Yeah, definitely. Mike, let's talk. Tell everybody how they can follow you. You're on Twitter. It's Roto Mike, right? At Roto Mike.
Yeah, at Roto Mike Barner, I post
Okay.
links to all my work there. A lot of fantasy, a lot of betting stuff, football, baseball, basketball. So I got you covered. Come check me out there.
Yeah, Mike's hardest working man in fantasy there. He's all over the place, several different sites. He's been on our site for several years. We really appreciate his work. He does a baseball column every week, a pitching one, and then during the NFL season, he does a column as well. So check out his stuff at RealTime Fantasy Sports also. Mike, I appreciate you joining me. It was a lot of fun talking with you today and getting everybody ready for the fantasy football season.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and don't forget, everybody, coming up here on the Better Sports Network is Getting Buzzed with Howard Bender at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. That's coming up here with Howard. He does a great job on there. A great show to watch. Again, thanks again, Mike, for joining me. Really appreciate it. And thanks, everybody, for watching out there. I appreciate it. This has been Jeff Power with Real Time Fantasy Sports.